Hello and welcome to the Green Team Podcast, where patrons of the Legendarium gather to talk about the books and topics our favorite podcast hasn't covered yet. I'm Yasna as a boy, hosting the show for the first time, and today we're going to talk about Priest of Bones by Peter McLean, a British Fantasy Award nominee for Best Fantasy Novel in 2019. With me today I have Little Red Book.
Hello.
Winty.
Hello.
And last but not least, Befuddled Panda.
Yep, it's me.
Priest of Bones is Peter McLean's debut fantasy crime novel, which is written as the memoirs of war veteran, criminal, priest, and businessman Thomas Piety. In a low fantasy setting resembling an alternate version of Britain after World War I, the soldiers return from the war to find the city of Ellenburg beset by plague and poverty. Piety must reorganize his crew, the Pious Men, to regain control of his businesses and streets, which were taken over by hostile interests during the war. While we're introducing this, for those who haven't read the book, here's a content and trigger warning for violence, PTSD, and sexual assault of minors, and probably also just child abuse in general, and the ramifications of child abuse on the victims. The start of this episode will be spoiler-free, and we will provide a warning before we get into spoilers. To start with, let's have everybody's overall impressions of the book and who you would recommend the book to. Want to start us off, Little Red Book?
I'm going to make you sad.
Okay.
I'll start off, so I would give this book about a 3. The author has it's written in first person, and the main character has some very annoying tics.
Which we'll talk about later, too.
Yeah. But it's a very strong voice, so there's that. I enjoyed the story generally. It's a fine book. I enjoyed reading it. I didn't hate it or anything. I liked it, but it's not something I would normally read, I don't think. I would recommend it, honestly, to people who like gangster stories. This book reminded me of The Godfather with a little bit of magic.
All right. And what about you, Winty?
I enjoyed my time with the book, so I can't say I didn't like it. I think it's a 4 for me, maybe. What I would have loved would be a bit more input into some of the other characters, like Sir Land. I don't think we learned much about him, other than he pretends to be a Sir. I would recommend it. I would not recommend it to people who don't like to read into very gruesome stuff, because there are some not so family-friendly descriptions.
That's putting it mildly.
All right. What about you, Panda?
Yeah, I thought the book was all right. It's not my, next favorite thing. There was enough intrigue to keep me going, and it was a quick read, which that was very nice. I did really appreciate the quick read. It's just not my preferred cup of tea. Also, reading it in the midst of reading Memories of Ice was probably impacted my enjoyment of this book, because Memories of Ice was just more complex, and this one by comparison is more simple and predictable. In terms of who I would recommend this book to, I would say if you like dark and gritty worlds, you like single POV and emotionally and psychologically tortured characters, then you probably would enjoy this book.
What about you, Yasna?
Yeah. So I mean, I give it a 4, probably also a 4 out of 5. It's one of my favorite books. Or at least the series is one of my favorite series. So I've read the second book, and I plan to read the third one. So that kind of impacts, I already know I'm going to like what's next after this. And I'm not just going off of, reading it for the first time. But, yeah, all of the things you guys hate about it are the things I love about it, and part of why I recommend it, which was so I was shocked by the tics bothering everyone, because for me, I went off of reading big epic complex fantasy onto this years ago or whatever, or a year or two ago, And I was just like, wow, like this character has such strong voice and the narrative's so simple and it's not like 50 hours long and I just love how brief it is. And, so I thought it would be a breath of fresh air from Memories of Ice, though I did warn Panda, like, it's not going to be as philosophically rewarding maybe as Memories of Ice, because Memories of Ice gets pretty deep and philosophical, as you mentioned. I would recommend this book to probably anybody who... So my idea was, all the people that hated Jade City but want to know more of like a good gangster novel, what I thought was a good one at least, that's who I was recommending it to. But also like to people who like grimdark, to people who like crime novels. I think it's a good example personally. And if you like, and number one, if you like Peaky Blinders, like I know there are some parallels with Godfather, but Peaky Blinders, I watched that and I was like, this is like watching Priest of Bones, but with less magic, and it takes place on Earth instead of like an alternate Earth. So, if you like Peaky Blinders. I think we've talked enough about the like crime and gangster comparisons to skip that for now. But just real quick, especially from the people that thought it was just okay, will you be continuing the series?
I think there's enough like intrigue for me to want to find out what happens next, but I'm not in a rush. So
fair enough.
It's like, yeah.
Probably
I think.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Little Red Book. Say that again. You guys came in at once.
Sorry, probably not.
That's fair.
Just because I have so many other things I'd rather read. Like, yeah, it was fine.
And Winty.
Yeah, I feel pretty like Panda, and I think I want to know what happens later, but right now it's not really on my priority with so many other books that I want to read. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right on. And I obviously have continued and will continue it. I want to review all three of them on my YouTube channel, or maybe discuss them with the author or something like that.
Is it going to be a trilogy, or will there be more than 3?
It's a tetralogy.
Oh, okay.
So there's 4.
Got it. And the 4th one will have released by the time this goes out?
The 3rd one will have released by the time this comes out. It comes out in like 2 days from when we're recording.
Got it.
So to move into like our first topic of discussion, what is everyone's thought about the writing style, and particularly the memoir format and single point of view? Did you like it or dislike it? Panda, you brought this one up, so why don't we ask you first?
Okay. I mean, so it's gonna be what Little Red mentioned earlier, the tics from the main character, well, the only character that we get to see whose point of view. It's also just repetition. So I wouldn't mind the tics so much, and maybe I should give some examples, like how he says, instead of saying I think, he says to my mind. That's totally fine. Like that's totally coherent in terms of the character, the setting, the way the timeline, I guess, also, like parallel historical timeline. It's just there was a little too much of it. And some other things that were a little just too much was how often he would say somebody is his second, or this is my brother, I don't trust this person, I knew that much, things like that. So it was just a bit too clunky and pulled me out of the story, and the writing felt like it was more telling than showing, which, being a memoir style, like that's gonna be how it feels. But I've also read other types of memoir style where it was able to achieve the more showing than just straight up telling. So yeah.
Okay. And what about you, Winty? What did you think of the memoir format and the single point of view?
I didn't realize that it was a memoir format until Panda pointed it out. Later in the book, I saw it clearly there. Yeah, he says he writes for the readers, and so And then I saw it clearly, but I don't know if I would have found it if it wasn't pointed out. So yeah, that was something to discover.
I do think that maybe listening to it would be okay, but I didn't have the audiobook, so.
Panda blew my mind, and it was on my second read through. I did not notice when I was listening to it. I was like, oh my god, she's totally right.
Well, what about the writing style and the single POV in general? LRB.
It's like what Panda said. He just leans into the ticks and stuff just a little too hard. Just back it up just a little bit. Just a little bit. You know, I don't mind the idea of him having ticks or anything. It's just,
yeah.
Oh my god. If he said "to my mind" one more time, I thought I was going to throw my phone out the window.
So I'd be interested.
In general, I did enjoy it. I mean, like, the only reason I'm not going to continue is I don't particularly like gangster stories.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, if you don't like gangster stories, there's not much for you here except, like, I mean, the magic system's cool, but I'm sure you could find a terrifying soft magic system that's not in a gangster story. So, Winty, you look like you want to say something.
I think, especially with the repetition, in the first chapter that we met the aunt, he repeated multiple times that she was a soldier. I thought we will later get more meaning for this, but it was just repeated there. Same with the different leading style from the brother, from Jochen. No.
Jochen?
Jochen. Okay, Jochen.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting point. He doesn't really show Jochen's leading style past like the first maybe 7 chapters or something like that, right?
I think that's at least in part because Jochen just gives up on leading. He just crawls into a bottle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He goes from like leading in a I don't care if anyone dies and I'm not going to show my emotions about it to I'm not leading. So yeah, with the memoir format for me, I also did not notice it until Panda pointed it out. But once she pointed it out and I asked Peter in a DM like, oh, hey, I didn't even realize this was like a diary or something. And he was like, oh, it's a memoir or whatever. I was like, wait a minute. No, I have noticed this. But it's like he says like, as I have written. And I go, oh, yeah, he's writing it. And then immediately my brain ignores it and just focuses on like the plot and the characters and the setting and the things I like about it. And like, it just did not affect me at all really until somebody like highlighted it. And I was like, whoa, it actually is. And as far as the single POV thing, I mean, the ticks, I don't mind, though I am interested in seeing if he does pull back on it in the sequel. Because I think this was his debut novel, as far as like publishing at least. Oh, go ahead.
I think he actually had a few novels published prior to this.
Oh, wow.
At least based on what I saw on Goodreads, but I'm not an expert on this author, so I could be wrong.
Oh, well, maybe I'm wrong. I just, for some reason I thought I had read that, but I could be wrong. Well, anyway, I'd be interested to see if he pulls back on the ticks in the following books. I read this for the first time on audiobook, and the second time I've never read it with my eyes. And the narrator's performance for me, like, just like that guy's voice is this character's voice, and it helped the verbal ticks, like the way he delivers them. It didn't feel unnatural at all listening to it for me. So it was fine for me, but I understand where everybody's coming from, obviously. Now, I did ask you guys in our group chat if it would be as bothersome if you had characters like this where the narration kind of absorbs the verbal style or the like the personality of the character to this degree, if it was like 5 characters instead of a single POV. And I think you guys both said, Panda and Little Red Book, that it would be less annoying if it was like that.
Even just getting somebody else's ticks in there, even if they're just different ticks.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and some of the ticks, it seems, were like regional sayings, because other characters were saying things like, I'm not going to let that pass, or whatever. So like those things seem to be like, oh, people in this country, because Anne's not even from Ellenburg, right? So those things seem
Right.
to be like either she picked them up from being around him constantly, or it's like everybody in this country, whatever the country's called, kind of says that. But then others of them seem to be specific to Thomas, I think. And yeah, I do prefer, last thing I'll say on this, I do prefer multi-POV stories like big sprawling epics usually, but at the time I first read this, it was a breath of fresh air from like coming off of like Joe Abercrombie or something where it's like really big, multi-POV stories. And with Grimdark, one of the ways that Grimdark is often different from like traditional fantasy often tends to focus on like the big picture narrative of like, the battles of countries with each other, or like, existential evil and good. Whereas Grimdark has like a swords and sorcery origin, and swords and sorcery stories are very personal. And so the narrowing of things down to a single POV kind of like leans into these are stories about like personal struggles. Not that you can't do multiple viewpoints with that, but it's kind of like something I've seen a lot more in the genre, as a lot of these, especially newer writers, are doing these single POV first person stuff for Grimdark instead of like, the third person multi POV stuff.
So I actually do like reading a single POV. A lot of the fantasy that I have read, like I haven't read that much epic fantasy. It's more, mid to low level fantasy that I've read. And I do enjoy the single POV. Like some of the books that I really enjoy that Little Red has also read is the Tamara Pierce Tortall books, and they are single POV, and they're very focused on the main character and the character's journey. So that part didn't bother me as much. It was more of just I think that in combination with the memoir format, that's just a bit difficult to do well, without being dull and repetitive and just telling instead of showing. So, yeah.
I don't know how to phrase this. I think that it just kind of feels like a new author. Like if he decides to not do gangster, I'll pick something of his up. I mean, like, sometimes you just read a book and you're like, I just read a book like this with Chesky and Soul, and I was like, yeah, you can tell he's just a new author. It's like his first, and he's going places. It's just like, it's like not quite there.
He has good ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll get into that, I think, a little later in the spoiler section. But
all right, so before we go into spoilers, this next topic is one that everybody, I think all four of us, wanted to talk about. The character of Thomas Piety and his philosophy of leadership, his ideas about leading men. Do you think Thomas Piety is a good leader? Winty, you want to start?
It's difficult to say if he is a good leader. I think he cares about his street and he wants that his street is good, but he also sets the greater good above maybe a life of a single crew member, even if he cares about them. But yeah, he says he doesn't care. He says you don't need to care to lead or to be a priest in this case. But I think he cares. But yeah,
maybe he's afraid to care too much.
Yeah, and we can get it a little into why he might be afraid in the spoiler section. LRB?
I 100% think he's a good leader. He's a little bit sociopathic. I do think he does care. But if you're going to be, and he just came out of World War I, right? And if you're going to be a leader of men, you're going to send him over the top into the firing line, and you just have to do it. So he is sometimes doesn't care if he's going to lose men, but he recognizes his men's strength. He rewards them when they do trustworthy things. He, let's see, I have a whole list of things that he does well. He admits when he's wrong. He gives them tasks to distract them when they need something to do.
Oh yeah.
And he suspends taxes. Like before he left, he would tax the neighborhood for protection. He was a gangster. It was protection money, right?
Right.
So he announces to everybody, I'm not going to charge you taxes until everybody gets back on his feet. You know, we're all in hard times. He knows when to stay quiet. He knows how to place compliments when they're needed. And like I said, he finds the right man for the right job. And that's what good leaders do.
You know, some would say that that is very manipulative.
I was going to say it's
that's
often
also
manipulative.
It is.
Yeah.
But frankly, I mean, there's a certain amount of manipulation that is involved in being a good leader.
Yeah, it's just kind of how you choose to view it, because sometimes it's more about like nurturing, helping people to realize their potential.
He does that though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like you could view it that way, and then somebody else could view it like, no, man, you're just making them do what you want them to do. So I can see both sides. So I think in terms of like, is he a good leader? Sort of, yes. He's pretty paranoid, which is understandable. He doesn't trust very many people, and he lets you know it. And then when he does trust people, it's only to a certain degree. So it's, I get it. I get the character. I get the context and situation that he's in. So given all of those things, I think he's a fairly good leader. There are a couple things where it's like, you can still see he's flawed. He's not perfect, but for the situation that he's in and what he's given, he's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, LRB, I was pretty on the fence about this question. I think you convinced me. I'll agree with the caveats that Panda gave, though, especially about him being manipulative. But
I mean, he's in a crime world. We expect
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And it's interesting
He's
that
a
they
good mafia boss.
Right.
How about that?
It's interesting that they call the protection money taxes, because, like, yeah, of course they're saying, well, you need to pay us protection money, or we'll bust up your business if you don't. I'm talking about before the war, you know, when he was doing the taxes. But it also, I think, shows, like, one of the causes, at least in America, I don't really know the history of, like, British organized crime, but at least in America, like, one of the causes of why, like, the Italian mafia developed in New York City and other parts of America was the way that Italians, especially, like, poor and working class Italians or small business owners, were being kind of, like, crushed and pushed off to the side, and the government's not really stepping in to, like, fill the role that these private businessmen and elite, and criminals are stepping in and playing some of the role of, like, providing for these people. You know, not saying it's ideal or that I support organized crime. This is not a pro-crime statement, right? But calling them taxes instead of just protection money, as you see if you watch, like, The Godfather or something, kind of highlights that disparity.
Right. So you pay protection money. They don't bust up your business, but they also make sure nobody else busts up yours. No, like, another gang won't come in and bust up your business.
Right.
Like,
but not just that. Like, they're also, like, helping to enrich some of the businesses that they're working with, and, like, keeping the streets safe and things like that. And at least in this book, I mean, I don't know enough about the history of organized crime in New York City to know how much of that happened in New York, right? But at least in this book, it shows the pious men, like, kind of helping everyone get off their feet and helping everyone, like, recover in a way that the governor is not doing. So, is there anything else we want to talk about before we get into spoilers?
Winty looked like he wanted to say something.
Does Winty want to say something?
I just think I have to correct myself from saying that he doesn't care. It's just traumatized, yeah, from the war,
I
and
agree.
keeps distance. That's probably better than don't care.
Yeah, because people just die right? And you really don't have control in war. And if you care too much, then it's just becomes so painful. So I think you're right. Like I don't think it's that naturally he's not caring. It's just he's protecting himself.
Yep. Anybody else for spoiler-free discussion? All right. So spoilers abound from here on out. And who wants to start us with their favorite and least favorite moments in the book, favorite and least favorite aspects, and favorite characters?
I can start. I'll start with some of my favorite moments. Aunt Ennead. How did they pronounce it in the audiobook?
Ennead. I don't know if they
Ennead.
consulted him before they did the pronunciations, but
Better than me trying to make it up. Aunt Ennead calling Mother Superior Mother Inferior and then punching her in the face. That was awesome. I really enjoyed that moment. And then there's a moment later on where Thomas Piety was like buttering up Captain Rogan and offering to let him join the Golden Chains, and Captain Rogan's response was just like, that pleases me. I still have to take you in, you know that. And I was like, yeah, I know, but that was fun. And then another favorite moment is saving the boy prostitutes from the stables. Yeah.
I don't know if favorite in not a happy way. I mean,
exactly. But it's like it was rough, but it was like one of those like yes moments. That's true. You know.
Do we want everybody to do favorite moments first and then get to aspects and characters? Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, a lot in this topic. Real quick though, the nun punching thing. Has anybody read Mark Lawrence's I think it's called Gray Sister?
Red Sister is the first book.
Gray Sister is the
second.
Sister.
Yeah.
Because
I've read Red Sister.
Remember the prologue when they're like, if you're going to kill a nun, you know, like here's all the things you have to do. You got to make sure you have enough people because the nuns are like warriors in that book, like they are in this one. Yeah, those two reminded me of each other. I didn't get very far in Red Sister, not because I didn't like it. I had to return it to the library, and I haven't got back to it yet. But I loved that opening about if you're going to kill a nun. Da, da, da. It's great.
Yeah.
Wenty, you want to talk about your favorite and least favorite moments? Oh, did you have least favorite moments in yours, Panda?
Let's just do favorites first.
Okay. Favorite moments.
Wenty. I think one of my favorite moments was the confession session, just because it showed how the leader quality of Thomas and that he cares.
And we got to see different characters shine. Yeah.
And then one get a shiner.
Yes, that too.
So I actually had chapter 17, which is the confessions chapter, on my reread. I wanted to reread it before we sat down because it was a very powerful scene. And then the other scene I like is when they're going up to the narrow channels. Is that the name of the whorehouse? To rescue.
Okay, go ahead. I don't remember the name.
To rescue, because the gut
cutters.
The gut cutters are raiding the whorehouse, and you have the knight sitting there, and he's like fighting, and Annie is like shooting crossbows over his head to keep them out of the room. And I was like, yeah, or Rose.
I think it was Rose.
Yeah, I was like, Rose is being a badass. And then after the burning of the aunt's house, when there's a pounding at the door at their main base, I can't think of the name of the tavern.
The tavern?
Yeah, the tavern. And Bloody Ann is all freaked out, and she looks through the flap, and then she opens it, and Rose just throws herself into.
Oh yeah.
I just loved it. And then it even made Thomas cry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
it made me cry too.
Yeah, that one. I don't know if I cried, but it was it's harder, I think, to cry for the audiobook than it is if you've got the book in your hands, at least sometimes. But it choked me up.
Not for me, but I cry pretty easy, so.
I wish. I try so hard. And because if you don't, then you get the build up but no release. It's
Yeah.
the crying is cathartic. But that scene was so beautiful, but it was also sad because it came right on the heels of
The confession.
Anne and yes, but right on the heels of, like, very much right on the heels of Thomas and her commiserating about how, like, oh, no one will ever like us, and you know,
Right.
like, we're gonna be
Yeah.
alone, and, like, so they had, like, the camaraderie of that moment of, like, sharing, like, how kind of estranged they were, and then you see Rosie come in and hold Anne through Thomas's eyes, so he's just
Right.
emptied out, like, that he feels like he can't ever find love, and to someone he thought was in the same boat as him, and then he sees this beautiful moment. You know, I mean, to me that was just like it was like the perfect blend of, like, happy and sad and heartwarming and heartbreaking, like, all, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not
you're-
heavy-handed.
Right. No, it's not. That is a hard one to follow up on, LRV.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. If I knew yours would be that good, I would have gone second to last or whatever. So, I like the sequences in Old Kurt's hut or house or whatever it is. He's creepy and interesting, and I picture him as the doctor from Deadwood. I looked up the actor's name before this and then completely forgot it, but I picture him as that same doctor, you know, and like that also was the same set of sequences where you get Billy the Boy getting creepier and creepier, and, like, the drawing that, like, comes to life and, like, unlocks Thomas Piety's PTSD. Like, there's just a lot there. So that was one of my favorite sequences. What about least favorite moments?
Yeah. So the Piety men attacked the businesses in the Wheel District, and Thomas was, like, being so smart, yet not recognizing that the gut cutters could do the same thing to the stink,
Right.
you know? And they did. And it's just like it felt like it was kind of dumb, and it was more for the plot. Also, after they attacked the Wheel District, Piety and his men, in the book it says, fled back to the stink through the alleys, taking wild turns and doubling back on ourselves until I was sure we had shaken off the pursuit. But it's not a secret, like, who attacked the Wheel District and where, like, the pious men would be hanging out. So I just thought it was like, um, it was meant to be a cool scene, but logic in my brain just wouldn't let me enjoy it, because I was like, the gut cutters could have just, like, gone to the tavern or one of, his establishments and just waited there to ambush them.
Right.
But anyway, so, oh, there was another one where Thomas Piety really prided himself in, taking care of the people of his streets, and he has lots of money. Like, we know about all the bags of gold, his businesses are doing well, yet he thinks this when denizens of the stink attack the gut cutters. When people have run out of food and hope and places to hide, do not be surprised if they have also run out of mercy. And I just didn't quite buy that thinking, because that motivation seems a bit off. Like, something that would have been more believable would be, Piety treats his people so well that they are very loyal and would risk their well-being and fight for him in the situation where, he was going to get overwhelmed by the gut cutters. And because Thomas Piety, like, really prides himself in protecting his people, not collecting taxes without rendering services, in this case, he wasn't able to hold up his words with actions. So I think it's, if I take a look at this in through the lens that, here is somebody who has a big ego, thinks very highly of his intelligence and smarts and abilities, and overestimates himself. And here are examples of how he is flawed and how he is overestimating his abilities, then I could buy that a bit more, but I'm not sure if that is how I was supposed to read it.
Yeah, I think I remember that was one of the few times where I was second guessing the narrative myself, actually, because I thought, like, why aren't people coming to him and saying, you're supposed to protect us, what the hell? You know,
Right.
like, wouldn't that be a moment for that kind of a scene?
Right. Because he makes that criticism of the gut cutters, right? They're taking their money and they're not able to actually protect the businesses that they're taxing. But it's the same for him, except there's that one scene where he tells the baker, like, hey, we're gonna pay for all the damages. We're not gonna tax you until you're back up on your feet. So, I, that kind of shores up a little bit of his claims of taking care of his people, kind of.
Right. Well,
Um,
and if people know that he's done that in the past, which we don't see, so we have to assume, which when you have to assume things, it's not always the best. They might not turn their rage instantly on him because they might think, oh, they're gonna help, but
yeah,
we
and
don't see
also
that.
because he thinks like, well, when people have run out of food and hope and places to hide, it's like, well, you say that you take care of your people, so why aren't you taking care of these people?
Yeah, why are they taking care of you?
Yeah, kind of.
Right.
So anyway, those are just some of the nitpicks I have.
So my first thing actually folds into what Panda was saying.
Mm.
That whole he had this hidden stash of gold thing, it bugged me so much. And I know it's because he was an informant and that's why he had it. So he had to hide it and blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, if his aunt, it's all so convoluted to, it doesn't quite hold together for me. And he's like, I can't spend the money on the food because if I spend the money on the food, then everyone's going to be like, where's all your money coming from? And it just, his aunt should have known about the money.
Mm-hmm.
I just.
And he thinks that too and somebody else points it out to him. Bloody Anne, right? She's like, if these people who are really close to you find out that you've been holding out on them.
And it's like, I mean, I understand why he would hide it from his brother. His brother's a hot mess, but his aunt was a responsible person and maybe she wouldn't have ended up at the convent.
The nunnery, yeah.
So
the convent.
There's two other.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. Can I? So I don't know if she was like this before he went off to war, but she kind of shows herself as being pretty judgmental towards like the state of warfare that he's in and has like pretty strong opinions on those. So would she maybe have pretty strong opinions on him taking money from the Queen's men and he like hid it from her because he didn't want to hear those opinions and didn't want her to like kind of like go up against him because of them? I don't know. That's
you're telling me he couldn't have figured out another way to launder that money so that his aunt didn't have to know where the money came from. And even if she asked, I mean, that's the thing that
criminals are paranoid. Go ahead.
I guess. So the other thing is, I'm trying to think of, there's another one I want to say, but the other thing is that they get this house and it's all set up and his new wife hires servants and whatnot. And these servants give the side eye to all of the gang. Like, this master spy couldn't find some freaking servants who could like know what's going on or like at least know, you know what I mean? Like, that part did not.
Well, I think in that situation he didn't have control because it was all
and it's her fault. I mean, no,
yeah.
She should have been able to find somebody who wouldn't be like giving all his gang the side eye every time they come. I mean, that's just like.
But wasn't their side eye more like pretentious, like, oh, you scumbags kind of stuff? Like, isn't any like refined servants that are used to serving nobility going to have that attitude?
Yeah, but the way I took it is that she knew who she was hiring for.
Right.
And the type of people that would be going in and out of the house. And it bugged me a lot. I'm like, that's just. There's one other thing. I can't remember what it is.
Okay. I do think that maybe she doesn't want those people coming in and out of the house. But
Yeah.
I think that's
fair.
more.
That's fair.
I think that's more set up in book 2, and using book 2 to excuse book 1 problems is not a good way to
No,
go.
but that's a
So-
fair point, though. You're
In
absolutely
book
right.
1, she tells him that he needs to distance from these people, right? Just don't get involved in the actual violence yourself. Just delegate to these people, and hence why she also wanted them to move out of the stink, into the more affluent part of the city. Like, she has plans. We only get to see the little bit that Thomas gets to know.
right.
So, yeah.
And
I stand
presumably those plans don't include the gang's assassin showing up with a head in a bag. I mean, so.
No,
but
I stand
you-
corrected. You're
you
right.
said you had one more thing, LRB.
If I think of it, we can come back to it.
Let me go, Winty. If your thing doesn't come right off of pandas as well, I'll go before you because
Okay.
my thing does come off of pandas. One thing is that, I mean, and I don't know if this is Peter McLean being inconsistent or Thomas Piety being inconsistent, which
Sure.
human beings are inconsistent, right? But it did bug me in the scene that you were talking about, Panda. The other thing that bugged me. So I have the least favorite moment, same one, but it's a different reason, or part of
Sure.
it is that in other parts he's like, oh, when people are oppressed and beaten down, they're weak and they're easy to manipulate and blah blah blah. And then like when that part he's like, don't be surprised when they don't have any mercy and just kick your butt. And I'm like, which one? I mean, really, oppressed people aren't always acting in the same way, so really it could be both too, and it's like the inconsistency of like people who are exploited and oppressed as well. But it didn't seem like he was aware of that difference in his head, and I don't know if that's like Peter McLean not being aware of the contradiction there or Thomas Piety not being aware of the contradiction. But it was a little off the way it was presented. That's just my personal thing.
I'm gonna side with, I think it's the character, just given how flawed the character is, even though we've said he's a good leader given the situation. I would chalk it up to the character.
Winty, what was your least favorite moment?
Okay, after all this deep favorite moments, least favorite moment, sorry. My least favorite moment was just personal. It makes perfectly sense within the story, but I don't like that we don't see anything from the final battle between the God Cutters and the Queensmen. It makes sense. They distance themselves from it, and
Yeah.
it's a problem that it's only a single point of view.
Right.
Right,
So-
because in The Godfather, when you have that pretty much the same ending,
Yeah, it's pretty much the same ending.
you get the perspective before you get the perspective of Michael Corleone. Spoilers for the like million-year-old book and movie. Before you get the perspective of Michael Corleone, you get, or maybe it's intermingled, but regardless,
It's
you get the perspective of each of the 5 assassins, or maybe it's 6. I don't know, but each of the assassins as they carry out their assassinations. And it's like mixed in, as LRB said, with the footage of Michael Corleone publicly attending this baptism. And that was the most
Satan. That was like
right.
that.
Yeah.
That ending is so good.
It's a great ending, and that was that's the most Godfather thing for me about this book.
Oh, I was gonna say I remembered what it was that would really bothered me, and it's something that is not in the book. So they have this whole thing with the boy prostitutes, right? And they have the female prostitutes but they're all adults. So that there's a bunch of girls out there too, and it just bothered me so much that they didn't touch on that point, because it was like,
I think
actually I know why
think
he didn't do it,
Yeah.
because he was trying to give the adult female prostitutes they had status and and respect, and they weren't slaves. They were doing it because they.
Well, there's 2 other reasons. One is that Thomas and his brother were molested as children.
I know.
Yeah, and then the other is that Ma Aditi has her preferences, But the thing is, she was a businesswoman, so it's not like she would. If she was gonna run little boys anyway, she would
Right.
also do girls. It wouldn't be just like, oh, you can only do the business that I enjoy consuming. Like, she's a businesswoman as well.
Mhm.
So
I just
yeah,
it was something that it kind of bothered me.
Mhm.
yeah, that's fair.
Shall we move on to favorite and least favorite aspects?
Yeah.
Haven't we already kind of done that?
Oh, I have more, but if we don't want to go into it, that's fine.
If there's more, I don't care.
Why don't you go ahead while I think about it?
Okay. So my favorite aspects, some of them were the distinction between knights and conscripts. So there was a part in the book where it says real knights, that is, not frauds like our Sir Eland. They had an iron god of glory and honor, with a big long lance and a mighty beast between his legs. Us conscripts don't want glory or honor. We just want to not die today. That was what Our Lady offered, if you were lucky and you fought your balls off. So I really did like that he gave that contrast of there are these people who want to fight for glory, and then there are the rest of the people who are just like, you know what? I did not cause this problem. I really just don't want to die. Glory, honor, that's fine. You can have it. Not for me. I just want to live. Another aspect that I did like is found family and bonding of strangers. Found family is one of my favorite tropes. So it was a bit disappointing that, something like a gangster style book, which it oftentimes does have like found family aspects, this didn't really work for me, but I still enjoyed this part of the book more than other parts. And they were just talking about how like the shepherds and pig farmers of the regiment might have left, but these lads, the soldiers who survived Abingdon, um, these ones who had been made of the sort of stuff that held men together under Yokun's chaotic leadership or under my cold, harsh justice, these were lads who would stay together through anything. So I did like that part. Oh, and then I think this part is the author inserting himself and making commentary on killing versus drinking. Like Billy the boy, who's like what, 12?
Hmm.
He's already killed men. So Thomas is like, well, you've already killed men. I don't see why you can't drink like a man too. And I think that's kind of a commentary about how like, and I know Peter McLean is British, so the drinking age is different. But in the U.S., right, the drinking age is 21, but you can sign up to be in the military when you're 18. So
17 even, I think.
oh
If
yeah,
you get a
depending
special
on
waiver from your parents, I think.
yeah. So it's like this dissonance between like, yeah, we'll give you weapons as a kid, but you can't drink. So yeah.
Or
So
smoke. It's
I
weird.
don't know if this is still an issue in British society, but in the 80s it was because I watched the show The Young Ones, and there's a episode of The Young Ones where they do an entire skit showing like dorky news anchor types asking young people what their issue of the day is, and you expect it to be like this variety of issues, and then like every single young person is like, I don't understand why I can sign up to go to war but I can't drink in pubs, and it's like every like 20 of them in a row say the same thing. So that at
Yeah.
least used to be an issue. I don't know if it still is.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's as much of an issue now since I believe a lot. Well, actually, Winty, you can tell us. In Europe, I think the drinking age is around 16, maybe.
It's for beer. It's 16. In here, I can only talk Switzerland. I think Germany is same-ish.
Mm,
It's 16 for beer and
mm,
18 for harder alcohol like
okay.
vodka or something.
Hmm. Yeah. So I'll stop there and let other people talk.
Favorite aspects, Wenty.
Uh, I don't know what to add here, to be honest.
No worries. I'm sorry I talk a lot.
No, it's fine. So this isn't really. Are we going to do quotes at any point, Yasna?
You could put it in quotes here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wrote this down because it got me really choked up. So I'm going to try and read it. That'll be fun. It's after Thomas listens to Anne's confession, and he blesses her, and it says, Anne looked up at me with water in her eyes. And that makes it right? No, Anne, but is all I have to offer. And so he just does these moments of real. He doesn't do it often, but when he does it really well. Like these insightful moments
Mm-hmm.
of, you know what, we can't make it right. We can just keep going on as
Right.
best we can. And yes, you lost your young lover, but now you have this new lover. And yes, I wasn't able to protect my brother, but I was able to rescue those boys. And that's all we have. And guess what? In real life, that's all you have. You can't make it right necessarily, but you just,
Yeah, you can't really change the past, but you
right.
can have more control of the future, at least in some sense.
So I guess that kind of fits with like a theme in the book that I actually really like. So it
Hmm,
worked. It worked out.
nice.
Yeah, and while Peter McLean has recently added himself to the long list of authors who don't want to call their work grimdark anymore, even though they write grimdark, that is one of the themes that's like ever present in grimdark. And if grimdark means anything, it's like looking at these personal struggles in a broader society that's kind of like crushing and constraining on people, and saying, we might not have the big grand solution to the problem, but we're going to carve out what we can out of like the hand we've been dealt with, kind of thing. It's a very existentialist drama in that, or genre in that way. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I love reading this stuff, even though it can sometimes be bleak and depressing and horrible and all the rest of it.
It's also drama.
It is drama, but I meant the genre.
Yeah, I know.
Or the subgenre of grimdark, or the writing style, or whatever you want to call it. There's 1,000 debates about what it is, but I can point at it and know it when I see it. And what LRB just said is part of what I think of as the central theme of grimdark. Yeah, I don't know how much more I have for favorite aspects either. I might be in Winty's boat. I mean, I love the crap out of this book, but those scenes that we talked about and then the characters are kind of what I want to hit on. So maybe we should move on to favorite characters, unless Panda, you had more, right, for this part?
No, we can keep going. Yeah.
So, Winty, you want to do a favorite characters?
Okay, I can do that. For me, my favorite character, the most interesting character, I would say, not really that I liked him because he's really dangerous and creepy, is Billy the boy.
Mm-hmm.
I really interested in what he can do with his magic, or how
Mm-hmm.
powerful he really is.
Yeah. He is pretty interesting, and like, what is his backstory? Because all we know is that there's this kid that these soldiers has happened upon when they were, at Messia. I think that's how you say it. And then he joined their crew. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of repetitive, honestly, but from me, it's Old Kurt is my favorite character. I love that character. I mean, maybe Thomas Piety too, but that's kind of obvious in a first person single POV story, so I'm going with Old Kurt. What about Old Kurt? He's just so interesting, and he's grumpy, and he challenges Thomas and isn't really afraid of him, though he is afraid of Billy the boy. And I just like him. What about you, LRB?
I think that Bloody Ann is my favorite character.
Mm.
Honestly,
I almost went with that too.
she's so she's smart, and she knows how to. She is also, by the way, an excellent leader. And she knows how to support Thomas and to support her men. And she just gets a great love story. I mean, we don't get to see too much of it. We just get to see the edges of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like her character. I have 3 characters that I enjoy more than most. It's Fat Luca, Harry or Hari, and Will the Woman / Will the Wincher. And they're all side characters, but I really enjoy the side characters more than the main character. And they did their parts really well. So
The right man for the right job, you might say.
yes, yes.
If you weren't sick of him saying it like 12 times in the novel.
Yes.
Reading these books makes me annoying too, because I keep saying to my mind instead of
I think.
In my or in my opinion,
I
he also
noticed.
uses it for both. I think, and for in my opinion. I mean, I think that phrase has snuck into my vocabulary anyway, but when I'm reading these books, it goes from like every once in a while to like all the time.
Whenever I read Pride and Prejudice, like certain turns of phrase that are a lot in Pride and Prejudice, I start saying them, and I'm like, "Stop it! You're not
I do
Lizzie."
that just from watching the A&E mini series of Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah,
Oh,
beautiful,
Colin
beautiful
Firth.
series. Yeah, I'm not even into dudes, and that man is just beautiful. So he's, woof.
Unexpected turn of conversation.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
So on to that levity was needed for what's next, because we're going to talk about the way the book deals with the trauma of the soldier and the trauma of abused children, or people who used to be abused children, really, because mostly we see it from the adult's perspective after they went through that. So what do you guys think of the way he deals with those topics in this book?
Does Wenty want to go first? No.
I can't go. I mean, I'm very lucky and never was in any situation similar to this or even close to this. So it's difficult for me to say if it's really accurate or not, but it looks accurate for me, at least. The way they see when Billy the boy draws the thing, what was, I don't remember what it was in there when they had to bring Thomas home from there. That was
The
it sounded
drawing
like
that
it.
unlocks.
Yeah, that unlocked his memories of the war.
Mm.
Yeah, it sounded really real to me. So
Yeah, the shell shock, like just
yeah.
being. Yeah, I'm the same. I am very lucky to not have had to experience that before. So again, I don't know necessarily how realistic, but based on just kind of accounts of things that I've read from whether it's people who have survived war or trauma, it seemed pretty realistic. And it was, I would say, like overall, the author's take on these heavy topics, they weren't that gratuitous. I think there might be a couple parts where it's a little on the fence. But overall, I think his treatment of soldiers and the depiction of their mindset it was pretty good. One of the one of the things that comes to mind is when Thomas is in the jail cell, and there's like the pallet that's full of lice, and he chooses not to sleep on it. He chooses to instead sit on the cold, damp floor with my back to the wall, huddled in my coat, and waited. Howard would have to let me go in the morning, I knew, and anything can be endured for a little while. It can when you know there will be an end to it anyway. Every soldier knows that. And that part just like, it spoke to me a bit more, where it's like, yeah, whether it's the end is the release of death or, the deaths of your enemy, or just that there is a time limit on things. That mindset is very true.
For me, I have not gone through anything like what Thomas has gone through. I have. I used to be in a street gang, and also my childhood had. And of course, there was a lot of abuse involved. Not just the people that you fight when you're in a street gang, but the people who tell you what to do, and that are supposed to be your comrades. There's quite a bit of abuse, and the guy that was in charge of our group was quite sociopathic and terrifying, and his hand was about the size of my face. So big dude. I mean, that does not compare. I mean, that's just kids, not kids, I mean, some of these are fully grown men, right? But it's just people pretending at being soldiers, as much as there's real violence and real abuse and real trauma that's not going to compare to like being in the trenches
Hey, Yasna.
of a war. Yeah.
Sorry, your audio is cutting in and out.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure like it actually records.
Sure. So yeah, that, I mean, obviously traumatic, and lasting issues, but nothing that compares to like the shell shock of a soldier that's in actual trenches, and there's explosives and blah blah blah. And then same thing like with childhood, I have like lasting anger issues from the explosions of anger, and compared to what Thomas went through, mild violence that I experienced as a child. So like, it's nothing compared to what these guys went through, obviously. But yeah, I can relate to Yakin's anger issues, if not the fact that he's a total idiot and takes them like way beyond where I would ever take them. But what about you, LRB? What do you think of the way that this stuff is handled in this book?
Wow, that's a hard act to follow.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to say all that, honestly, before I sat down.
Well, I've not been to war, and I've been in an abusive relationship, but it was not physically abusive, and it was not sexually abusive. It was just, but my entire family is in the military, or was in the military. I grew up around people in the military. What I appreciate most about the way he deals with it, and I think he does a pretty accurate job, is that not all the characters respond the same.
Yeah.
He shows a variety of different reactions. There are ways that Thomas reminds me of my grandfather in the way he deals with people. And and my dad was in Vietnam and he crawled into a bottle. So, so, I mean, I like that he showed that there are many different ways we respond to trauma. And, so I thought that was well done.
Agreed.
Yeah, so now we're just we're off the set topics and we're into the general discussion of the book. So is there anything anybody wants to bring up about the book here?
Guys, this is The Godfather. This is The Godfather with magic and post-traumatic stress disorder.
I think it's
last
Peaky.
Scene is so on the nose.
I think it's Peaky Blinders, and then the last scene is The Godfather. But same thing.
But it was well done. The last scene was well done. But I kept seeing that baptism scene in the back of my head the whole time I was reading that book.
Absolutely.
I tried to watch Godfather, but
you can just watch that one scene. It's really worth it just to watch that one scene. It would take away from the movie, or the impact of it, but to see that scene, it's a really well done scene.
Okay.
If it's any consolation, the second book is nothing like Godfather Part 2. Or even Godfather Part 1. But it is still like Peaky Blinders in at least some ways.
Okay.
I
think Panda was going to say something.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. I'm done.
Oh, okay.
So, what about the magic system? Because that's one thing The Godfather doesn't have, and Peaky Blinders has very soft magic. What did you guys think about like this soft magic system and the cunning, so to speak?
I didn't mind it. I actually just, because I have read like primarily low to mid level fantasy, and this soft magic was totally fine for me. The one aspect that I wasn't keen on about the magic is this kind of convoluted distinction between magic and witchcraft. And I just thought that part was a bit dull and dragged on a little bit. I think I know what the author may have been trying to say is just like, does it really matter? For some people it does, but ultimately, if it's the same thing, like, subjective. Yeah, it's just subjective.
Right.
Winty, did you have something to say?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Thomas doesn't seem to care about it,
No.
so I decided not to care about it. It was fine when it showed up. I liked it when it showed up. It was cool. Fireball.
Yeah. Personally, I think the cunning is terrifying, and I think not knowing the rules at all, the quote unquote rules, because there aren't any, adds a level of like you never know when or where or how or what the magic is going to do, and that like can make it a little more intense when it does break out, or more scary when you know people can use it, kind of thing. That's just me personally.
If just real quick, if you are somebody who cares about magic systems, you will be very annoyed because it's not made clear. You don't, you know what I mean? Like if you like Brandon Sanderson style magic systems, you're going to be annoyed at this magic system.
Yeah, this is very much of the school of philosophy of to quote I forget what character in the First Law trilogy or First Law series, rules, if it were magic, or if there were rules, it wouldn't be magic. And that's the philosophy behind the magic system. There is no system. It's very like Tolkien-esque. It's yeah. What was that?
Magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, coming from Sanderson, I really expected to get a difference between witch and the magic witchdom and wet magic thing, but it didn't disappoint me. I just waited for the explanation that it never came, so it was
there
just
is
different, not bad.
There you will get in book 2, if you ever get to it, a little bit of not an explanation as much as a display of the difference between the high magic of the magicians in the capital compared to the cunning. I mean, I don't want to spoil it for the listeners or you guys, so I'm not gonna say what that is. But you do get a little bit, but it's like shown, not told, and there's no like, here are the rules. Vin, Kelsey are explaining the rules of Allomancy. You won't get that. Yeah. Anybody else have anything they want to bring up, or?
I'm good.
I need to go back to work soon, so.
Yeah, should we wrap up with what other books would you recommend?
Sure. I guess I'll start. If you like this book and you want to read more like grimdark fantasy, Ed McDonald is what I read as a follow-on onto this. His Blackwing, I think it's called the Raven's Mark trilogy, and the first book is Blackwing. It's not the gangster stuff, but it's a similar like first-person single POV, relatively short novels, grimdark trilogy, and it worked for me coming off of this. So, what about you, Winty?
I don't think I read many grimdark books. I listened to First Law, so that would be the obvious recommendation. But yeah, other thief story would be Lies of Locke Lamora, but it's not really the same level of gruesome or.
And it's a con. It's a con book.
Yeah, it's not a gang. It's.
I mean, they
more
are, but,
high.
Yeah.
The first book, they're in a gang, right? But it's not like a mafia.
Yeah,
gang.
I think there's similar enough elements that if you
agree.
really enjoyed this, I think you'll enjoy Lies of Locke Lamora.
They pretend in Lies of Locke Lamora, they pretend to be a gang like the Pious Men on the face of it, and then underneath that, they're doing all kinds of different stuff. But the other similarity is that they're both criminal priests. Locke Lamora and Thomas Piety are both priest criminals. What about you, LRB? What would you?
I actually hadn't thought this through, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's called Guns of Dawn by a guy whose name is Tchaikovsky,
Adrian
composer. Thank you. Tchaikovsky. Like the I wonder if he is related to the symphony writer. Yeah, so I would recommend that. It's more on the war side though. And its magic system is pretty soft too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also more of a romance. But it's not straight up a romance. So
I'll have to check that out. And you, Panda, what other books would you recommend to people who like this?
So it's a bit of a stretch of a recommendation. If you like the memoir format, you like the single POV, and you like the urban kind of setting. But you didn't enjoy the like grittiness and the grim darkness of this, the Becca Cooper series by Tamara Pierce. I mean, at least the first book, which
Is
is
Kip
called
paying you?
Kip is not paying me. Which is called Terrier, and I thought that her approach to the memoir style, or like diary style, was pretty good. So that would be an example of how it's more done in a way that you show more than you just tell. Yes. And it's a female protagonist.
If you care.
All right. Any closing thoughts before I take us out?
Congrats on your first host episode.
Yeah.
Yay!
First time hosting, and I forgot to put the Craig bots on for the first half of the episode.
In fairness, we all didn't notice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were just like, yeah, Audacity, cool. And,
Well, at least we remembered the Audacity, and we weren't just like doing a phone call for the first half. All right. So that concludes our episode. You can find us on the Legendarium's Discord. The invite link is on thelegendarium.com. We are also on Twitter at Green Team Pod and Reddit. Join us in supporting the Legendarium via Patreon. Music is Galactic Damages by Jingle Punks. Shout out to Horizon Brave for starting it all. And thank you to our panelists, Little Red Book, Wenty, and Befuddled Panda. I'm Yasna as a boy. Until next time, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's because you're a decent human being who does not need to read Malazan.
Hey, get out of here! Malazan's actually going to be later this evening.
Oh, okay, with the less decent people. Okay, that's
Yes. Me and Yasna are two of those least decent people.
Don't listen to the romance. If you think I'm a decent person, don't listen to the romance
No,
episode.
Craig, do listen to our romance
Don't.
episode. Yes.
So, Craig, do you dislike Malazan? Or Malazan, rather?
No, not at. I've never read Malazan. I just
He likes
it's
giving
one
us
of those
crap.
things where we've been hounded so hard for so long about Malazan that I have this like psychological block against it, where it's like, fine, I'm never going to read Malazan, that sort of thing. So,
Well, I was that way till about a month before we started recording it. And then I was like, this is the best fantasy I've ever written. I take back everything I said about it. Or, yeah, please let me record these episodes with you guys.
yeah. Anyway, so I'm just going to head out to baseball practice with my kids. So,
Oh, fun.
You got the
yes.
Mariners attire on you right now.
yeah, if there's anybody in the world who knows how to be a true fan, it's a Mariners supporter. Because they suck.
I don't know. Cubs fans have it hard too.
Yeah, tell me about the last time the Cubs won the World Series in 2016. Now tell me about the last time the Mariners went to the playoffs in 2001. So, yeah, it's brutal. Anyway, all right, enjoy, guys.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Craig.
Bye.
Thank you.